Jason, so I told you a little bit about this at the top of the episode. This is not a case I was familiar with, but had we were we living in South Africa, I can almost assure you that we would have been aware of this because this apparently has been a huge case there for the past year and a half. A little girl, 6 years old, Joshlin Smith, went missing from outside her home in Saldanha Bay, so a little coastal town near Cape Town, South Africa, in February of last year. The February 19th, she was reported missing. The disappearance of Joshlin triggered nationwide concern throughout South Africa, yet despite an extensive and highly publicized search operation, authorities have yet to locate the missing girl. And we'll show a picture, we'll put it up on the YouTube here, but what a beautiful little girl this was. Not that it matters if she was or wasn't, but it's just it's just adds a layer of sadness, little dark complected girl with hazel colored eyes and just really pretty little face. And you think of the innocence of a child and
have their whole life ahead of them. When you look at a child, you're like, I'm whatever, however many years old I am, but it's just like when you're 6, you've got so much ahead of you to look forward to, all the things.
Yeah, and this is nothing at all against, I don't want to get into a big thing here because I'm not saying anything negative about South Africa, but we've all heard enough stories about the things that happen in South Africa, and it's a country or a continent that has a lot of turmoil and has a lot of cultural differences and has a lot of war and corruption, and there's just so much that happens in trafficking and just there's so much there, and it can be a very beautiful place, and it can also be a very ugly place. And you just think of a 6-year-old little girl who's very pretty being missing in a place like that. Again, it just adds a layer of like scary to this. So this case, from what I could find, we're sort of starting at the trial and the conviction and working backwards from there, because, and I don't know how the courts work in South Africa, but in the US, everything's publicized, everything's televised and social media and all that stuff. I don't think it's quite the same there. With the minute-to-minute updates, but a lot, I think, of what has been learned has come out through the trial and the coverage of the trial itself, not so much leading up to it, which is, if you think about it, a pretty smart thing because it keeps the jury a little less, you would think, right?
We have issues in this country in like things getting blasted out in a big way, and how is that influential on jurors, right? I mean, we're going through the Sean Combs trial right now, and there is a lot of lead up, but on that one, they saved some of the shock, right? And to some of the details that are coming out, they saved.
Yeah, because once it's in trial, that's when everything comes out, and then it's it's public knowledge. It has to be, at least most places in the world. And there's no hiding the details there. So she was arrested, Joshlin's mother, and stands trial in March. The proceedings, because of how big this case had become, the proceedings took place at Saldanha's multi-purpose center, which was a venue chosen by the judge, Nathan Erasmus, to ensure the community has access to the trial. And that, I thought, was kind of cool. We're not having it in the big courthouse or whatever. We're having it in a community center because maybe it's big enough to fit all the people that need to be in there, but also it's in a location where people can have access to be there and to participate in this trial. Even for the verdict announcement, they closed roads, in the vicinity around this place. They deployed police throughout the area. So, it was a big deal, and I guess they didn't know what to expect. But
that's interesting.
Yeah.
If you've ever been to, quarters of in a courthouse, I think they're kind of intentionally not, you know,
Welcoming.
or building too many rows or seats,
Yeah.
right? Like, although you feel like the public stoning would happen if you made it into some sort of gladiator arena. I'm being extreme, of course, but what I mean is like there's a reason why they're of a certain size and have a certain capacity. You know?
Well, yeah, and a lot of the courthouses really were built quite a while ago. I mean, at least in the US, in a
Yeah.
major city. I mean, if you go to the Los Angeles courthouse, it's an old building. You know what I mean? I don't think they were ever, when building these places, expecting like this to be a thing, to follow court trials like this and whatever.
Well, and I would actually say that the Wayne Williams trial in the Atlanta child murders was such a big deal at the time that what they actually ended up doing was sending all the reporters, or most of the reporters, downstairs into a separate room, and they piped in a closed circuit TV feed.
Yeah.
They never recorded that feed as a video artifact, which kills me, of course.
Yeah.
But there was people lining up every morning to get the seats, the public seats versus, the prosecution and defense. But like they actually had to have an overflow plan for that particular case or trial because of the interest, right?
Well, yeah, and you look at something like the O.J. Simpson trial, or a
Right,
big case like that where there are thousands of people outside of the courthouse in the streets, and so I
right.
think that that's, if that's not what this was, it's what they were expecting because
Hmm.
of just how much attention it had around it. Um, the case again garnered intense public interest across the entire country of South Africa, with testimony in the trial revealing numerous disturbing allegations. The most startling testimony came from a woman named Laurentia Lombard, who was a neighbor and friend of Smith, the mother of Joshlin, who served as a state witness. Lombard testified that Smith had confessed to doing, quote, something silly. Um, you know, something silly. And this story is about trafficking a 6-year-old girl of your own. It just kind of takes the words out of your mouth. She revealed she had sold Joshlin to a traditional healer, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, referred to in South Africa as a Sangama. According to Lombard's court statement, the person who allegedly took Joshlin wanted her for her eyes and skin. Don't know. Little context and clarity here. I don't know, and I couldn't find if that was because her eyes and skin were beautiful. Again, she had, you know, um, like hazel colored eyes, very, very pretty little girl. And you're 6, how bad is your skin going to be? And I don't know if it was because, oh, look how beautiful her eyes and skin are, or you're talking about traditional healers in South Africa. Is it something like you want to use the eyes and skin for something?
Ooh.
Sounds crazy to even talk about this, but again, we're talking about an entirely different culture with, going back thousands of years, and you're talking about traditional healers, and they do some stuff that is not the norm in America. You know,
Yeah, Stark.
it is, yeah. But again, I couldn't find what the answer there was. And a little context on the traditional healers, the Sangamas. They actually hold legal recognition under the Traditional Health Practitioners Act of 2007, alongside other traditional medical practitioners such as herbalists, birth attendants, and surgeons. However, some individuals operating fraudulently in this field have been known to engage in questionable practices, including the sale of supposed good luck charms containing human body parts. So that's why I mention, it's just such a creepy statement to say,
Yeah, well, yeah. I
I
mean,
like her eyes and skin.
it's bad enough that it's the mother of this girl. Like, who does that? And then,
The reasoning.
Yeah, kinda not knowing what's on the other end, like sending your
Or,
child into that world.
or worse, knowing and still doing this.
Right.
You
Right.
know, the accusation that Smith had contemplated selling her daughter, coupled with references to drug issues, had sparked broader discussions about, the vulnerability of kids. And, because again, if you're living in a small village, a small area, you have these traditional healers, it just sort of becomes in a poor area. She, will try to find a picture to put up of where this little girl lived. I mean, they were poor, a very disadvantaged community, as there are many of them in South Africa.
Yeah.
Um, Her hometown of Middelpas, uh, local parents expressed to media outlets that they're even now, more than a year later, after her disappearance, still very concerned about the safety of their own children. I think probably part of that too plays into I don't know, I'm trying to find the word, not mythos, but like just the beliefs held by, let's say, villagers. I mean, for lack of a better word, you're talking about, again, these traditional healers, which I think of as like a medicine man or witch doctor.
Right.
Um, I would have just kind of a scary situation to be in. Further testimony at the trial from a local pastor indicated that in 2023, so this is a year before, or at least 6 months before the disappearance of Joshlin, he had overheard Smith, who has two other children, discussing selling her kids for 20,000 rand, which is approximately $1,100 US. The pastor added that Smith had mentioned being willing to accept a reduced sum of $275. This is to sell your kids to.
Just the complete devaluing of a human life
Yeah,
is disgusting.
yeah. There are more allegations. Um, Joshlin's teacher claimed in court that during search efforts, Smith had told her that Joshlin was already, quote, on a ship inside a container and they were on the way to West Africa. Which is just crazy because, number one, there are at least, right here, I've named 3 different witnesses who have said, I heard her say this, I heard her say this. Why are you talking about this stuff with people if that's your intention, if that's your plan to traffic your child? And you're just, I mean, that's nuts.
And they didn't speak up at the time either.
Yeah, there's that. Um, the defense attorney representing Smith questioned the credibility of a lot of these allegations, of course, highlighting inconsistency in particular, in Lombard's testimony, and characterized her as a opportunist. Though I don't quite understand what opportunity you think you're gonna get out of this, coming forward in court because I'll be a part of the Netflix documentary. Doesn't make any sense. What are you
Right.
gonna gain out of this? Um, Through proceedings, Smith, Appelis, and Van Ryn, her 2 co-conspirators, opted against calling any witnesses to support their defense. Additionally, none of these 3 defendants chose to testify during the trial. And I'll talk about these other two folks here in a second. The court did find Kelly Smith guilty, along with her boyfriend, Jackeen Appelis, and their associate, Stefano Van Ryn, in connection with the disappearance of Smith's daughter. And as the guilty verdict was announced, Smith was observed wiping tears from her face while Van Ryn displayed an unexpected smile. And the way I read it in a couple different places, he just sort of, when the verdict was read, this guy just sort of broke out in a big smile. No context, just creepy and disturbing, When the verdict was announced, the courtroom, cheered and applauded, and a lot of people obviously crying. Apollos and Van Ryn, the 2 co-conspirators, were convicted of kidnapping and trafficking. And again, they all pled not guilty. But
We don't know where the little girl is, right?
she's still not been found. Yeah, so these people getting convicted, that brings a level of closure, right? But the fact that she's not been found, and with all the public, especially now, not just in South Africa, not just in the Cape Town area, but this is worldwide. You know, it's like I don't want to say you lose hope, but with all the heat on it, it's kind of like if you've bought this young girl and now there's all this heat on it, what are you likely to do? That's the scary thought.
The concept of trafficking, it it's mind-blowing enough already, but we hear about this every single day. The scale of trafficking, I mean, we've heard this, trafficking through the Atlanta airport. If you go in the airport, there's messages where they tell you if you need help, if you feel like you're being trafficked, find someone, say something. That's insane to me. Like where we live, right?
Well,
He,
Atlanta's a hub
right.
of human trafficking. I mean, it's a worldwide hub.
Isn't that crazy though? Like when you
Yeah.
really step back to think like what it takes to traffic someone and then being in a hub and you go to the Atlanta airport, it's massive, there's tons of people, and you might be looking unknowingly at someone that's being trafficked. That's crazy to me.
Yeah, and we were talking. I don't remember what episode it was that I pulled up those statistics about how many times in your life you've encountered a
Right.
murderer,
Right.
and or like a serial killer. But how many times in our lives have we encountered someone unknowingly that's being trafficked or that has been trafficked? And it's
It could actually be more than like running into the serial killer
I
or
would
murderer, right?
absolutely assume
You
that
know what
it
I mean?
is. I would
Yeah.
assume that it is, especially living in a place like Atlanta. And
So
I
so
think,
co- yeah, so combine those things, right? And you're
yeah,
like,
everyone
who
around you.
I don't know anyone anymore, right?
Well, yeah, and you think too, like if someone has been trafficked and they live through it, oftentimes they might end up homeless. So you might not even ever know, homeless, addicted to drugs,
Right.
potentially even then dying from that. So there's probably a lot of trafficking victims that we just will never know about.
Yeah, they don't make it.
Yeah. And I did read something, this was maybe 6 months, a year ago, that human trafficking in the world is, because it's such a lucrative business, sadly, that it is actually set to overtake, or has overtaken recently, drugs, as far as how much money is made off, because drugs is just a multi-billion dollar industry in the world, and that human trafficking is actually set to overtake that as the you know
Yeah, we can find drugs in your suitcase as you're trying to get through the airport, but it's a lot tougher, right? When you've got real humans involved and but you're going by looks or suspicion, you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. I don't get it. I don't, luckily, but I don't understand. You see these videos, and you guys are all listening, you've probably seen these videos on, X or Instagram or wherever, where they've caught this stuff on camera of like kids being abducted or attempted abductions. And there was a story that really went viral, maybe a year ago. And it was like a mother and father walking into a Walgreens or something. And they had their little kid, and they were both holding the hands of the kid. Like the kid's walking in between them, they're both holding one hand. And someone walking out, passed them and then turned around and snatched the kid and ran down the street. And, the parents are just kind of like, it takes a second to even realize what happened. And they did catch the guy. Um, the father runs down the street after him, and they caught him. But I mean, it's that brazen now, and it's not even, or people at the airport, like you said. There's a video that's going around right now of a father, some guy on the phone, and there's two people. One distracts him by asking him, look at my phone, and someone behind just grabs the kid's hand and just skirts off. So it's really scary. Keep your eyes open, and
Yeah.
anyway, that's that's the story of Kelly Smith. I really would love to get an update on this story one day that they've found this little girl and she's okay. Um, but you know how that stuff goes, unfortunately.